The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 47 species screamed, chittered, and roared at each other while Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat perfectly still, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Her calm demeanor only seemed to enrage the aliens more. "This is madness!" screeched Ambassador Zixthilla, her crystalline form pulsing with angry red light. The ethereal delegate's voice cut through the air like broken glass. 3,000 years of peace, and now the humans dare to smile while our worlds burn. Elena finally stood, her movement so smooth and controlled that it commanded instant attention. The chamber fell silent except for the nervous clicking of mandibles and the wet breathing of various atmospheric filters. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber without any amplification. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding." The reptilian ambassador Kethvar slammed his massive clawed hand on his speaking platform. "Misunderstanding? Your species has violated the sacred peace accords. You have mobilized military forces for the first time in 3 millennia. Elena's smile widened just a fraction. "We have indeed mobilized our forces, but not to break the peace." "Then explain the battle fleets massing at Sol," demanded Ambassador Quinara, her insectoid features twitching with agitation. "Explain the weapon signatures our sensors have detected. Ships armed with technologies we have never seen." "Gladly," Elena replied, clasping her hands behind her back. "But first, perhaps you could explain why the Void Swarm has returned to our galaxy?" The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Several ambassadors began to back away from their speaking platforms, primitive fight-or-flight responses overriding their diplomatic training. "Impossible," whispered Zixthilla. "The Void Swarm was destroyed. We saw the records. The great fleets of the ancient civilizations sacrificed themselves to end that threat forever." "The records you saw," Elena said gently, "were incomplete." She activated a holographic display that materialized above the chamber's center. The image showed a vast region of space where stars should have been, but weren't. Instead, there was only darkness punctuated by the occasional flicker of something massive moving through the void. "Our deep space monitoring stations detected the first incursions 6 months ago," Elena continued. "At first we thought they were natural phenomena, dark matter fluctuations perhaps. But then we noticed the pattern." The hologram zoomed in to show a closer view. What had appeared to be empty space was actually filled with ships. Countless ships, each one the size of a small moon, drifting silently through the darkness between stars. Ambassador Kethvar's massive frame shuddered. "How many?" "Conservative estimates suggest 12 billion vessels in the advance fleet alone," Elena replied matter-of-factly. "Our analysts believe this represents perhaps 1% of their total force." The chamber erupted in panic. Some delegates began frantically working their communication devices, trying to contact their home worlds. Others simply stared at the hologram in shock, their minds struggling to process the scale of the threat. "This cannot be," shrieked Quinara. "The Void Swarm feeds on conflict, on war. They were drawn to our galaxy by the great wars of the ancient times. But we have had 3,000 years of peace. There has been nothing to attract them." Elena nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. There has been nothing in our galaxy to attract them, which raises an interesting question. What drove them away from their previous hunting grounds?" She manipulated the hologram to show a wider view of the galactic cluster. Several neighboring galaxies were visible, but they appeared different, dimmer, in some cases completely dark. "Our long-range telescope suggests that the Void Swarm has been busy for the past 3 millennia, Elena explained. "Andromeda appears to be completely lifeless now. The Magellanic Clouds show no signs of technological civilization. And now they're coming home." The silence in the chamber was deafening. Finally, Ambassador Zixthilla managed to speak, her crystalline form now pulsing with fear rather than anger. What do we do? Our military forces were disbanded generations ago. We have merchant vessels, exploration ships, but nothing that could stand against even one of those monstrosities. That, Elena said, her smile returning, is where humanity comes in. What do you mean? Demanded Kethvar. Elena began walking slowly around the chamber's central platform. You see, honored delegates, while your species were enjoying the benefits of peace, humanity was, well, we were being human. I don't understand, said Quinara. Peace, for most species, means the absence of conflict, Elena explained. For humans, peace simply means the absence of external conflict. We turned inward. We competed with ourselves. We pushed boundaries that no one thought could be pushed. She gestured, and the hologram changed to show human space. What the other delegates saw defied their understanding of stellar engineering. Stars that burned too bright, planets in impossible orbits, structures that spanned entire solar systems. You dismantled your militaries because you had no need for them, Elena continued. We kept ours because war is what humans do. It's not something we choose, it's something we are. So when peace was declared, we simply found new ways to wage war. Against whom? Whispered Zixthilla. Against physics. Against mortality. Against the very laws of the universe. Elena stopped walking and faced the assembled delegates. We waged war against entropy itself. The hologram zoomed in to show massive orbital installations around human worlds, factories that stretched from planet to planet, ships being built that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. For 3,000 years, we told ourselves we were preparing for exploration, for expansion into the void between galaxies, Elena said. But deep down, I think we always knew. We always knew they would come back. Ambassador Kethvar leaned forward, his massive frame trembling. Are you claiming that humanity can stand against the Void Swarm? Elena's smile became something altogether different, something that made primitive parts of alien brains scream warnings about apex predators. Honored delegates, she said softly, we're not going to stand against them. We're going to hunt them. The chamber erupted in noise again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was hope, mixed with terror at what humanity had apparently become during their long peace. The question before this council, Elena said, raising her voice to cut through the noise, is not whether humanity will fight the Void Swarm. That decision was made 3,000 years ago, when we chose not to disarm. The question is whether you will fight alongside us, or whether you will hide behind us. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the chamber. Because make no mistake, honored delegates, this time we're not just going to drive them away. This time we're going to follow them home. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as her fleet moved into position. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the other ships in her battle group taking their assigned coordinates. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, built during the long peace when other species thought humanity had grown soft. They had been wrong. Admiral, called out Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, we're receiving transmissions from the alien defense fleets. They're asking if we're sure about our battle plan. Chen allowed herself a small chuckle. Tell them we appreciate their concern, but we've been planning this fight for 3,000 years. We're sure. The alien fleets hung back at what they considered a safe distance, roughly 10 million kilometers from the projected emergence point of the Void Swarm's main force. By human military standards, they might as well have been sitting in the next solar system. Distance to contact? Chen asked. Void Swarm forces will breach normal space in 17 minutes, Admiral, responded Commander Park from the tactical station. Estimated enemy strength, 400,000 vessels, ranging from destroyer class to planet killers. And our forces? 12 ships, ma'am. Chen nodded as if this were the most reasonable thing in the world. Around the bridge, her crew continued their preparations with the calm efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. The human military had never stopped drilling, never stopped preparing, never stopped assuming that someday someone would need killing. "Admiral," Torres said again, "the Crystalline Collective is requesting permission to withdraw their forces to minimum safe distance. They're saying we're going to get them all killed." "Grant permission," Chen replied, "and send them our thanks for their participation in the evacuation efforts." What the aliens didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that humans had spent 3 millennia preparing not just weapons, but an entirely new way of thinking about warfare. While other species had dismantled their military academies, humans had turned theirs into universities of creative destruction. "Signal from the UES Retribution, Admiral," Park announced. "Captain Williams reports his singularity cannon is charged and ready." "Acknowledged." "Signal from the Nemesis?" "Captain Rodriguez confirms her temporal displacement mines are deployed and active." Chen nodded, checking her tactical display. Each of the 12 human ships represented a different approach to the art of war. The Defiance itself was equipped with what the research teams called probability artillery, weapons that didn't just destroy targets, but retroactively ensured they had never existed in the first place. "Ma'am," Torres said, his voice carrying a note of disbelief, "I'm getting a transmission from the Void Swarm fleet. They're trying to communicate." This was unexpected. In all the historical records, the Void Swarm had never attempted communication. They simply arrived, consumed everything that lived, and moved on. "Put it through," Chen ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a sound like the death of stars, a voice that seemed to come from the void between worlds. "Young meat, why do you not flee? Your terror feeds us. Your despair nourishes us. Yet you remain. Why?" Chen stepped forward, activating the communications array. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Forces. We remain because this is our galaxy. You are trespassing." The sound that came through the speakers might have been laughter, if laughter could freeze the heart of a star. 3,000 of your cycles ago, the prey species united against us. They fought bravely. They died screaming. We consumed their warriors and feasted on their hope. Now we return, and still they send only 12 vessels? Your species has grown foolish in peace." Chen's smile could have cut diamond. "You're right about one thing. We have changed, but you've misunderstood how." "Elaborate, meat." 3,000 years ago, your kind fed on the fear and hatred of a galaxy at war with itself, Chen explained, signaling her weapons officers to begin final preparations. "You gorged yourselves on the negative emotions of dozens of species locked in eternal conflict. Do you know what you're going to find this time? Enlighten us. A galaxy that has learned to love, species that have spent millennia in cooperation, building something beautiful together. You're going to try to feed on fear and hatred, but those emotions are barely present in the current galactic civilization. Then we shall create fear. We shall birth hatred. We shall—" "No," Chen interrupted. "You won't. Because we're not going to let you reach the other species. 12 vessels against 400,000. Your confidence is amusing." "You're thinking about this wrong," Chen said, her voice taking on the patient tone of a teacher explaining mathematics to a slow student. "You see, we didn't bring 12 ships to fight 400,000 of yours. We brought 12 ships to fight all of you. Every single vessel in your entire fleet across every galaxy you've conquered." There was a pause in the transmission. "Impossible. We number in the trillions. Our forces are about to discover why humans never stopped preparing for war," Chen finished. "Torres, broadcast on all frequencies. Signal the fleet. Weapons free. Execute Omega Protocol. What happened next would be debated by military historians for the rest of galactic civilization. The 12 human ships didn't move to engage the emerging Void Swarm fleet. Instead, they simply changed. The UES Retribution fired its singularity cannon, but instead of launching the artificial black hole at the enemy fleet, Captain Williams aimed it at the fabric of space-time itself. The weapon tore open a rift that connected to every other point in space where Void Swarm forces existed. The UES Nemesis activated Captain Rodriguez's temporal displacement mines. Instead of simply exploding when the enemy drew near, the mines began rewriting history itself, creating timeline loops where every Void Swarm victory became a defeat. Every consumed civilization fought back from beyond extinction. The remaining 10 ships of Chen's fleet each contributed their own impossibilities to the growing maelstrom of directed chaos. Weapons that convinced matter to stop existing, shields that protected not just the ships, but the very concepts the ships represented, engines that moved through dimensions where the Void Swarm couldn't follow. "What have you done?" The alien voice now carried something that might have been fear. "What are you?" "We're what you created," Chen replied, watching as her tactical display showed Void Swarm forces across the galaxy simply ceasing to exist. 3,000 years ago, you taught us that peace was a luxury we couldn't afford. You showed us that the universe contained things that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be negotiated with, could only be destroyed. The space around the human fleet began to twist and fold in ways that made no sense to conventional physics. The emerging Void Swarm vessels found themselves caught in a web of impossibilities, their planet-sized hulks crumbling as reality itself rejected their existence. "So we spent 3,000 years learning how to break the rules," Chen continued. "We learned how to wage war not just against fleets and armies, but against the fundamental forces that allow our enemies to exist. This is not possible. You are merely mortal. You were mortal," Chen corrected. "That was another rule we broke. Death, you see, was just another enemy to defeat. Entropy was just another fortress to storm. The heat death of the universe was just another battle to win." Through the viewports, the alien fleets watched in stunned silence as 400,000 Void Swarm vessels simply folded out of existence like origami made of collapsed space-time. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. "Admiral," Commander Park reported, his voice steady despite the impossible events unfolding around them. "We're detecting Void Swarm forces throughout the galaxy beginning to fade. Whatever we did here, it's propagating backward through their entire fleet network." "Good," Chen replied. "Phase 2 is working as planned. How long until we can begin Phase 3? "Temporal calculations suggest 6 hours, ma'am. The causality loops need time to fully establish themselves before we can begin the final push." Chen nodded, turning to face the communication station again. "Torres, open a channel to the alien defense fleets." "Channel open. Admiral, this is Admiral Chen to all galactic defense forces. We appreciate your assistance with civilian evacuations. You can stand down now. We'll take it from here." The response came immediately from Ambassador Elena Vasquez, who had insisted on observing the battle from the command ship of the Crystalline Collective's defense fleet. "Sarah, what exactly is Phase 3? And please tell me it doesn't involve anything more flexible with the laws of physics than what we've already seen." Chen's smile was visible in her voice. "Elena, Phase 3 is when we stop playing defense and start hunting. We're not just going to remove the Void Swarm from our galaxy. We're going to follow them home and make sure this never happens again." 6 months after the Battle of the Void Threshold, Admiral Chen stood in the observation deck of humanity's newest achievement, the UES Pursuit, a ship that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and could track its prey across the breadth of creation itself. The galactic civilizations had watched in stunned silence as humanity dismantled not just the Void Swarm's invasion force, but their entire presence in known space. What the aliens thought would be impossible had taken human forces exactly 47 hours to accomplish. Now came the hard part. "Admiral," reported Captain Liu from the bridge, his voice carrying through the ship's neural interface. "Long-range sensors are detecting the Void Swarm's home realm. It's not what we expected." Chen closed her eyes and allowed the ship's consciousness to share its sensory data directly with her mind. What she perceived defied every model of reality they had developed. The Void Swarm's origin point wasn't in normal space, or even in the dark matter substrate that human scientists had learned to navigate. It existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats, in the darkness that existed before light was even a concept. "How many are we looking at?" she asked. "Conservative estimates suggest quadrillions of entities, Admiral. But they're not all ships. Some of them are bigger." Chen opened her eyes and smiled the same smile that had terrified the Galactic Council. "Bigger how?" "They appear to have consumed entire realities, ma'am. Not just universes, whole dimensional frameworks. They're using collapsed space-time itself as construction material. Through the neural link, Chen could feel the presence of the other human fleet commanders spread across the impossible distances of the interdimensional void. Admiral Kim, whose task force had spent the last 6 months learning to navigate spaces where physics itself was merely a suggestion. General Santos, who had convinced his Marine units that death was a temporary inconvenience and had trained them to fight as abstract concepts rather than physical beings. Admiral Patel, whose engineering corps had begun construction on weapons that existed as pure mathematics. "Signal from command, Admiral," Captain Liu announced. "Director Morrison wants to speak with you before we begin the final phase." Director Morrison appeared as a holographic projection in the observation deck. She looked exactly as she had 3,000 years ago, when humanity had first learned about the Void Swarm threat. The techniques they had developed to transcend mortality had their benefits. "Sarah," Morrison said without preamble, "are you certain about this course of action? We've achieved our primary objective. The Void Swarm is no longer a threat to our galaxy. We could simply establish monitoring stations and defensive perimeters." Chen shook her head. "That's not good enough, Director. We learned something important during the invasion." "Which is?" "They're not just predators," Chen explained, gesturing toward the impossible vista outside the ship. "They're farmers. They consume civilizations not just for sustenance, but to cultivate the negative emotions they feed on. Every galaxy they've touched, every reality they've devoured. Those weren't random attacks. They were carefully managed harvests." Morrison frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that if we don't end this now, permanently, they'll simply wait another few million years and try again. Not just here, but everywhere. Every possible reality where life might develop, where consciousness might emerge. It's all just potential food to them." "And you believe we can stop something that vast?" Chen's smile widened. "Director, we've had 3,000 years to think about this problem. We didn't just prepare to defend our galaxy. We prepared to defend the very concept of life itself." Through the ship's neural interface, Chen felt the presence of her fleet shifting into final battle configuration. 12,000 ships, each one carrying weapons and technologies that redefined what warfare could be. But more importantly, each ship carried something that the Void Swarm had never encountered in all their eons of existence. "Admiral," Captain Liu announced, "all fleet elements report ready. The reality anchors are in position. The possibility engines are charged, and the conceptual artillery batteries are armed with everything we've learned about hope." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Hope? You're weaponizing hope?" "Among other things," Chen replied. "You see, Director, the Void Swarm feeds on fear, despair, hatred, all the negative emotions that arise from conflict and suffering. but they've never encountered a species that learned to weaponize the positive emotions. Through the bridge speakers, the familiar sound of the Void Swarm's communication reached them. But this time, the voice carried uncertainty. "Impossible creatures. You should not be here. This realm is beyond your understanding." Chen activated the ship's communication array. "Oh, we understand perfectly. This is where you've been hiding while you sent your harvesting fleets to consume galaxy after galaxy. This is where you retreat when someone fights back effectively. Well, we're here to tell you something important. Speak, mortal." "We're not here to fight you," Chen said, her voice carrying across impossible distances to reach entities that had never known defeat. "We're here to teach you." "Teach us? You've spent millions of years learning to consume, to destroy, to feed on the worst aspects of consciousness, but you've never learned the most important lesson of all." Chen signaled her fleet, and 12,000 ships began to execute the most ambitious military operation in the history of existence itself. "What lesson is that?" The Void Swarm's voice now carried something new: curiosity. "That creation is more powerful than destruction. That hope is stronger than fear. That love—" Chen paused as her weapons fired. Not the traditional energies of war, but something entirely different. "Love is the most destructive force in the universe, if you're trying to maintain an existence based on hatred and despair." What emerged from the human fleet wasn't destruction in any conventional sense. Instead, it was possibility itself given form and direction. Each ship fired streams of pure potential, the mathematical certainty that things could be better, that consciousness was valuable, that existence was worth preserving. Where these weapons touched the Void Swarm entities, something unprecedented occurred. The creatures didn't die. They began to remember what they had been before they became predators. They began to experience the emotions they had consumed from their victims, but in reverse. Every moment of terror they had caused became a moment of joy. Every civilization they had destroyed was restored to existence, not just as memory, but as living reality. "What have you done to us?" The Void Swarm's voice was changing, becoming multiple voices, becoming the voices of all the beings they had consumed across the eons. "We've given you back everything you took," Chen replied, watching as the impossible realm around them began to transform. Galaxies that had been devoured were reforming. Universes that had been collapsed into construction material were expanding back into life-bearing space. Realities that had been harvested were blooming again with the potential for consciousness and growth. "But more importantly," she continued, "we've shown you what humanity learned during our 3,000 years of peace. That war isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about transforming them into something better." The transformation spread through the Void Swarm's realm like a chain reaction of hope. Entities that had been pure predators for eons began to experience empathy, curiosity, the desire to create rather than consume. The dark realm itself began to brighten as fundamental forces shifted from destruction to construction. "Admiral," Captain Liu reported, wonder clear in his voice, "we're detecting massive reality restructuring throughout their dimension. It's beautiful, ma'am." And it was. Where once there had been only the dark spaces between existence, now there were new universes forming, universes designed not for harvesting, but for nurturing, places where consciousness could develop safely, where civilizations could grow without fear of cosmic predators. "Humans," came the voice again, but now it was speaking in harmonies of gratitude rather than the discord of hunger. "We understand now. We remember what we were before the hunger. We thank you." Chen nodded, feeling the satisfaction of a job truly completed. "Don't thank us yet. You have a lot of work to do. Millions of years of damage to repair, countless civilizations to restore. Think you're up for it?" "We are, but..." Will you help us? Will you teach us how to create as effectively as we once destroyed? Chen looked out at the transformed realm, where former predators were now working to rebuild everything they had once consumed, and her smile became something warm and welcoming. "That's what humans do," she said simply. "We teach, we build, we make things better, and after 3,000 years of peace, we've gotten very good at it." As the UES Pursuit began its journey home to report the successful completion of humanity's longest military campaign, Chen reflected on what they had truly accomplished. They hadn't just saved their galaxy, they had saved the very concept of peace itself, ensuring that nowhere in existence would consciousness need to fear the darkness between the stars. The war was over, and for the first time in cosmic history, it had ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. Humanity had taught the universe something it had never learned before, that even the darkest hunger could be transformed into the brightest hope. Now that, Chen thought to herself, was worth 3,000 years of preparation.